He thought love was a weakness until she walked in with nothing but a contract and a heart full of innocence. What began as a cold business arrangement soon turned into something he never planned for. But falling for her was never part of the deal, especially after discovering the truth she had kept hidden from him all along. The setting sun painted streaks of orange and gold across the skyline as Tristan Wolfe stared out the massive glass windows of his Manhattan penthouse office. On his desk lay the divorce papers, signed and sealed. At 36, Tristan had built Wolfe International from scratch, turning it into a global empire. But no boardroom victory could erase the sting of betrayal. His marriage had crumbled into a scandal, and trust, the one thing he valued most, was a currency no longer worth trading. Mr. Wolfe, the board is waiting. His assistant's voice buzzed through the intercom. Tristan tapped the button. Tell them I'll be there in 5. He stood, adjusting the cuffs of his black tailored suit, the kind of armor he wore daily to keep the world at a distance. The skyline mocked him now. New York had once felt like his kingdom. Now, it just reminded him how quickly dreams could fall apart. His hand hovered over a manila envelope containing evidence, photos of his ex-wife and his biggest business rival. She'd played him, just like everyone else who had pretended to care. The scandal wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Layla, his now ex-wife, had passed confidential company data to Charles Donovan of Apex Holdings during their marriage. Their romantic dinners had turned into intelligence drops. And Tristan? He had been too busy building the future to notice his present was slipping away. Never let your guard down, his late father had warned. Not even for love. The scotch on his desk burned on the way down, but tonight it was welcome. A knock interrupted the silence. Marcus Lynn, his longtime legal advisor, stepped in with a thin stack of papers. Final divorce documents. All assets are clean. She's waived everything under the prenup. Tristan barely nodded. Any fallout with the board? Marcus hesitated. They're concerned about your image and succession. Tristan narrowed his eyes. Succession? Marcus nodded. Company bylaws. The board wants assurance of stability. That includes a married so. Tristan scoffed, the laugh bitter. They want me married again? Marcus stepped forward, voice low. A temporary solution. A contract marriage. Just until things stabilize. Quiet, clean, no emotions. Tristan's jaw clenched. The idea was absurd, but also perfect. No vulnerability. No lies. Just business. Draw up the terms. Clauses for privacy, loyalty, public appearances, everything. I want someone with no connection to Apex Holdings. Preferably someone with a background in finance or law. Marcus nodded, already typing on his tablet. Understood. And your preference on personality. Tristan looked out at the city again. Someone who won't ask for more than what's written in ink. As Marcus left, Tristan sat down and stared at the signed divorce papers again. Love was off the table. Trust? Destroyed. But control, that he still had. And if the sham marriage bought him time to restore order, then so be it. Little did he know, fate was already in motion. Across the city, in a much smaller office with buzzing fluorescent lights and an overworked copy machine, a young woman was working overtime, unaware that her life was about to collide with his. Aubrey Lane tapped away at her keyboard, her green eyes flicking between spreadsheets. At 24, she was the youngest junior financial analyst at Harlan & Company and had zero intention of leaving until her tasks were done. It wasn't just ambition that kept her late. It was necessity. Her mother's mounting hospital bills, rent, and the looming threat of medical debt haunted her every decision. When her phone buzzed with another overdue payment alert, she sighed, burying it under a stack of reports. You still here, Wonder Girl? Jasmine from HR leaned against Aubrey's cubicle with a teasing smirk. You know they don't pay overtime, right? Aubrey smiled faintly, finishing the Emerson account. Jasmine arched an eyebrow. You might want to put that down. Rumor is Emerson's merging with Wolfe International. Aubrey blinked. Wolfe? She'd been watching that company's stocks for weeks. The CEO had recently gone through a scandal, but the details were vague. Her curiosity was piqued. By the way, Jasmine added, lowering her voice. Some big shot from Wolf called HR asking about you. Aubrey froze. Me? Why? Jasmine shrugged. No clue, but Marcus Lynn himself requested your background check. Aubrey's pulse quickened. Why would one of the biggest companies in the country care about a junior analyst like her? She barely had time to wonder before her phone rang. Unknown number. Instinct told her to let it go. But something made her answer. Mississippi Lane? The crisp voice spoke. This is Marcus Lynn from Wolf International. I apologize for the late hour, but Mr. Wolf would like to meet with you privately tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. sharp. Transportation will be arranged. Please consider this confidential. Aubrey blinked, heart racing. May I ask what this is about? A pause. It's a proposal. One that could change your life and ours. Aubrey barely slept. She kept replaying the call over and over in her head. A proposal that could change your life. What did that even mean? The next morning, dressed in her best pencil skirt and a soft cream blouse, she stepped into the sleek black town car, waiting outside her apartment. The driver offered no information. Only a polite nod as they pulled into Manhattan traffic. Her nerves churned with every passing block. Was this a job offer? A promotion? Or something far stranger? The car stopped in front of Wolf International's headquarters. 50 floors of shimmering glass and steel. She stepped out, shielding her eyes from the morning sun, and followed a sharply dressed assistant through a maze of marble halls and private elevators until they reached the top floor. The doors opened to reveal a massive office bathed in golden light. Tristan Wolf stood at the window, his back to her. Mississippi Lane, he said without turning. Thank you for coming. Aubrey swallowed her anxiety. Mr. Wolf, may I ask what this meeting is about? He turned slowly, his sharp suit and sculpted expression radiating the kind of power that demanded attention. His eyes, icy blue and unreadable, met hers with measured gaze. I'm going to be direct, he said. I need a wife. Immediately, in name only, a marriage contract with clear terms. No romance, no expectations. Aubrey blinked, stunned. Of all the scenarios she'd imagined, this wasn't one of them. I'm sorry, what? She asked, unsure she'd heard correctly. Tristan stepped forward, setting a thick folder on the glass table. This is not a joke. My company's bylaws require the CEO to be married to retain voting power. My previous marriage ended, publicly and painfully. I don't have time to court or date. I need someone trustworthy, quiet, unaffiliated with my world. Aubrey's heart thudded in her chest. Why me? He gave a tight smile. Your background is spotless. You're discreet, and you're desperate for money. She flinched at his bluntness. Excuse me? I've reviewed your records, your mother's medical bills, your scholarship history. You work overtime every night. I don't mean to offend Mississippi Lane, but we both know you could use financial security. Aubrey crossed her arms. That's awfully cold. It's honest, he replied. This isn't a romance novel. It's business. 1 year, you'll be compensated generously. Full anonymity. And once it's over, you'll be free. He paused. Unless you prefer drowning in debt. The silence stretched. Aubrey didn't respond immediately. She sat down, flipping through the contract. Clauses about privacy, public appearances, NDA agreements, and even a no intimacy section caught her eye. It was thorough, almost robotic. What if I say no? She asked finally. Then I'll find someone else, Tristan replied coolly. But you'd be walking away from 6 figures, luxury housing, and a full medical sponsorship for your mother. Her throat tightened. That was low. And yet, how could she ignore it? Aubrey stood, eyes locked with his. You're asking me to give up my life for yours. He tilted his head. Not give it up, just share it, publicly. And what do I get besides money? Tristan's expression flickered. Just for a second. Freedom, he said softly. Once this is over, you'll be free of the burdens weighing you down. Completely. Something about his tone felt real, wounded even, as though he understood what it meant to carry a heavy heart. Aubrey bit her lip. She wasn't sure whether to pity him or run. Why no intimacy clause? She asked. Tristan didn't blink, because feelings complicate things. You're here to protect my company, not fall in love. I won't pretend I'm capable of emotional attachments. He sounded so sure, so cold, but Aubrey saw something deeper behind his eyes. A scar maybe, or a memory he refused to touch. She nodded slowly. Give me 24 hours. He agreed, offering a card. Call that number when you're ready. As she left the office, her mind swirled with uncertainty, and something else she didn't want to name. That night, Aubrey sat on the fire escape of her apartment, her mother's soft breathing audible through the cracked bedroom door. She looked down at the contract. It was crazy, immoral maybe, but also a lifeline. Could she really marry a stranger for money? For safety? For survival? She closed her eyes and pictured his face. Stern, elegant, unreadable. He wasn't a villain, but he wasn't a hero either. Just a man protecting his empire, while offering her a way out of her crumbling world. By morning, she had made her decision. At 8:59 a.m., she dialed the number. Tristan answered on the first ring. I'll do it, she said, her voice calm but firm. There was a pause, then a soft exhale from his end. We'll begin immediately. Neither of them knew what the future held. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a contract anymore. It was the beginning of something that would change them both forever. The wedding happened 5 days later. No flowers, no vows, just ink and signatures inside a marble courthouse downtown. Aubrey wore a simple white dress she borrowed from Jasmine, while Tristan stood beside her like a man attending a board meeting. There were no witnesses except Marcus and a government official who didn't look up once from the paperwork. It was the coldest wedding she'd ever seen, but strangely it didn't feel wrong. She wasn't marrying for love. She was marrying to survive. And he was marrying to keep power. Still, as their hands brushed, a strange chill bloomed in her chest. Aubrey moved into Tristan's penthouse that same evening. The space was vast and pristine, more museum than home. Glass, chrome, and silence filled every corner. Tristan showed her the guest suite and a separate walk-in closet. You'll have complete freedom, he said. Just be present at events and follow the schedule. She nodded. The rules were clear. Appear happy. Wear the ring. Maintain the illusion. He even had a personal stylist drop off designer gowns tailored to her size. Aubrey stared at her reflection later that night. Dressed like someone she didn't recognize, married to a man she didn't understand. The first event came a week later. A gala hosted by Wolf International to re-establish investor confidence. Cameras flashed as they stepped out of the car, Tristan's hand resting lightly on her lower back. Smile, he murmured through his teeth. We're madly in love tonight. Aubrey forced a radiant grin. They posed, clinked glasses, and danced one slow waltz under 1,000 chandelier lights. Her pulse quickened every time his hand brushed her waist, but she told herself it was just part of the act. And yet, the way he looked at her, for a fleeting second, didn't feel like acting at all. Back in the penthouse, silence fell between them. Tristan poured himself a drink, his tie loosened just enough to show a side she hadn't seen before. You handled tonight well, he said quietly. Thank you, she shrugged, avoiding his eyes. You paid for the performance. He flinched slightly, almost imperceptibly, and Aubrey regretted the sharpness in her tone. I didn't mean it's okay, he cut in. You're right. But something had shifted between them. The air wasn't so cold anymore. It was heavier, like tension mixed with something warmer. Something unspoken. Something neither of them had prepared for. Days turned into weeks, and something unexpected happened. They started having conversations. Real ones. Over coffee. In the kitchen. In the back seat of limousines. Aubrey learned about his childhood. How his father taught him business before he turned 10, and how his mother left when he was 12. He learned she loved classical music, baked when she was anxious, and carried guilt over every hospital bill she couldn't pay. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it wasn't just business anymore either. Some nights, she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, and she didn't look away. One rainy evening, the power flickered. They shared a bottle of wine by candlelight, a rare smile touching his lips. You don't talk about your ex, she said gently. His smile faded. Because I chose wrong. He stared at the candle for a long time. She loved my money. Not me. Aubrey's heart ached. Then why marry again? He looked up. Because I need someone I can trust. She held his gaze. Do you trust me? He didn't answer, but the silence between them said more than words ever could. The fire crackled softly in the corner of the penthouse, casting flickering shadows across the sleek walls. Tristan sat beside Aubrey, a glass of untouched wine in his hand. For once, the silence between them wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Aubrey traced her fingers along the rim of her teacup. Can I ask you something? She said, barely above a whisper. Tristan looked at her, sensing something different in her voice. Of course. She hesitated, then took a breath. When you married me, did you think I had experience with this kind of life? With men? He blinked, surprised by the question. I didn't think much beyond the contract. Why? Her gaze lowered. Because I didn't. I've never been with anyone before. The words hung in the air, delicate and heavy. I wanted to wait, she continued, voice trembling slightly. Not for marriage exactly, but for someone I trusted. And until now, no one ever made me feel safe. Tristan's breath caught, not because she was innocent, but because she was brave. She had shared something deeply personal, and she trusted him with it. He set the wine down. Aubrey, he said quietly, you don't owe me an explanation, but thank you for telling me. She gave a small, uncertain smile, and in that moment, Tristan knew this wasn't just about a deal anymore. She was no longer just a contract. She was a woman who had just shattered the last wall around his heart. Paragraph 7. The next morning, everything changed. Aubrey woke up to find a single rose placed outside her door, along with a note that read, For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Her heart thudded. She knew what this was. A crack in the armor. A window into something real. But real was dangerous. Real meant risking everything. She tucked the note into her drawer and tried to forget the way it made her feel. But she couldn't stop the flutter that danced in her chest every time she saw him after that. That evening, they had their first real argument. Tristan returned late from a board meeting, looking distracted and withdrawn. Are you okay? She asked. It's nothing, he said flatly. But it wasn't nothing. He was distant, cold again, walls going up. If this is just a job to you, then don't pretend to care, he snapped. She stepped back. I do care. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Silence stretched. Regret hung in the air. He looked at her like he wanted to say something, but instead, he turned and walked away. Aubrey sat alone in the dark for hours. What was she doing? Falling for a man who told her up front that love was not part of the deal. But he wasn't just a man anymore. He was a version of himself he didn't show anyone else. And she was no longer just a poor girl who needed saving. She was part of his world now, part of his pain, and possibly part of his healing too. The next morning, she knocked on his office door. We need to talk, she said softly. He looked up tired, vulnerable. Aubrey, I'm sorry. Her throat tightened. Me too, but you don't have to fight alone anymore. He reached for her hand slowly, like it was a fragile thing. This wasn't supposed to happen. I know, she whispered, but maybe it was meant to. And just like that, the rules of their arrangement began to dissolve. Not in ink, not in contracts, but in quiet glances, gentle touches, and the kind of love that crept into the smallest cracks. Spring arrived with soft skies and blooming trees, but the biggest change had nothing to do with seasons. It was the way Tristan looked at Aubrey now, like she wasn't just part of the plan, but part of his piece. They shared breakfast without scripts, walked through Central Park without pretending. The contract still sat in the drawer of his study, untouched, forgotten. One morning, as sunlight spilled across the kitchen, Tristan set down his coffee and said, What if we made this real? Aubrey blinked. You mean? He nodded. No more terms. No more conditions. Just us. Aubrey's chest swelled with something warm and unfamiliar. Love wasn't supposed to be part of this deal, but had found them anyway. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "You once said love makes people weak." Tristan stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No," he said. "Love makes people brave. I was just too scared to see it before you." She searched his face and saw no mask, no wall, just a man who had been hurt, healed, and transformed by something he never believed he deserved. "Then yes," she said. "Let's make it real." The second wedding wasn't public or grand. It was held in a quiet garden, beneath flowering trees, with only a handful of close friends and a few golden rays of sun. No board members. No cameras. No contracts. Just vows whispered like secrets between two people who had chosen each other without obligation. Tristan held her hand with reverence, Aubrey's eyes shimmering with tears that held both pain and joy. When he kissed her, it wasn't for show. It was home. And this time, the marriage wasn't about saving company. It was about saving each other. Months passed, and Aubrey didn't just thrive. She bloomed. She started a scholarship fund in her mother's name, returned to school part-time, and even began advising on philanthropic projects for Wolf International. Tristan stepped away from the harsh, relentless grind of business and embraced balance. Love softened his edges, but it never weakened his drive. It gave him purpose. They traveled, they laughed, they fought sometimes, but they never stopped choosing each other. Not once. Every day felt like a quiet victory over the past they'd both been trying to escape. One quiet evening, Aubrey found the old contract tucked away in the back of a drawer. She held it up to Tristan with a smile. "Remember this?" He laughed and took it from her, tossing it into the fireplace without a second glance. "Best deal I ever broke." As the paper curled into ash, they curled into each other on the couch. No lies, no secrets. Just two hearts that had once signed a business agreement and ended up rewriting the definition of love.